Hello, friends. This is the second story in the series of 15 short stories. Punishment by Rabindranath Tagore. When the brothers Dukhiram Rui and Chidam Rui went out in the morning with their heavy farm knives to work in the fields, their wives were already quarreling and shouting. But the people nearby were as used to the uproar as they were to the other customary natural sounds. As soon as they heard the shrill screams of the women, they would say, "They're at it again." That is, what was happening was only to be expected. It was not a violation of nature's rules. When the sun rises at dawn, no one asks why. And whenever the two knives in the Kuri caste household let fly at each other, no one was at all curious to investigate the cause. Of course, this wrangling and disturbance affected the husbands more than the neighbors, but they did not count it a major nuisance. It was as if they were riding along life's road in a cart whose rattling, clattering, unsprung wheels were inseparable from the journey. Indeed, days when there was no noise, when everything was uncannily silent, carried a greater threat of unpredictable doom. The day on which our story begins was like this. When the brothers returned home at dusk, exhausted by their work, they found the house eerily quiet. Outside, too, it was extremely sultry. There had been a sharp shower in the afternoon, and clouds were still massing. There was not a breath of wind. Weeds and scrub round the house had shot up after the rain. The heavy scent of damp vegetation from these and from the waterlogged jute fields formed a solid wall all around. Frogs croaked from the pond behind the cowshed, and the buzz of crickets filled the leaden sky. Not far off, the swollen Podda looked flat and sinister under the mounting clouds. It was flooded most of the grain fields and had come home to the houses. Here and there, roots of mango and jackfruit trees on the slipping bank stuck up out of the water, like helpless hands clawing at the void for a last finger hold. That day, Dukhiram and Chidam had been working at the Zamindar's office building. On the sandbanks opposite, paddy had ripened. The paddy needed to be cut before the sandbanks were washed away. The poorest villagers were busy there, either in their own fields or in the other people's fields. But a bailiff had come to the office and forcibly engaged the two brothers. As the office roof was leaking in places, they had to mend that and make some new wickerwork panels. It had taken them all day. They couldn't come home for lunch. They just had a snack from the office. At times, they were soaked by the rain. They were not paid normal laborers' wage. Instead, they were paid mainly in insults and sneers. When the two brothers returned at dusk, wading through mud and water, they found the younger wife, Chandara, stretched on the ground with her sari spread out. Like the sky, she had wept buckets in the afternoon, but had now given way to sultry exhaustion. The elder wife, Radha, sat on the veranda sullenly. Her 18-month son had been crying, but when the brothers came in, they saw him lying naked in the corner of the yard, asleep. Dukhiram, famished, said gruffly, "Give me my food." Like a spark on a sack of gunpowder, the elder wife exploded, shrieking out, "Where is the food? Did you give me anything to cook? Must I walk the streets to earn it?" After a whole day of toil and humiliation, to return raging with hunger to a dark, joyless, foodless house, to be met by Radha's sarcasm, and especially by that last insinuation, was suddenly unendurable. "What?" he roared, like a furious tiger, and then, without thinking, plunged his knife into her head. Radha collapsed into her sister-in-law's lap, and in minutes she was dead. "What have you done?" screamed Chandara, her clothes soaked with blood. Chidam pressed his hand over her mouth. Dukhiram, letting the knife drop, fell to his knees with his head in his hand, stunned. The little boy woke up and started to wail in terror. Outside, there was complete quiet. The herd boys were returning with the cattle. Those who had been cutting paddy on the opposite side of the river were crossing back 5 or 6 to a boat with a couple of bundles of paddy on their heads as payment and were now nearly all home. Ramlochan Chakraborty, pillar of the village, had been to the post office with a letter and was now back at his house, placidly smoking. Suddenly he remembered that his subtenant Dukhiram was very behind with his rent. He had promised to pay some today. Deciding that the brothers must be home by now, he threw his chadar over his shoulders, took his umbrella and stepped out. As he entered the Rui's house, he felt uneasy. There was no lamp alight. On the dark veranda, the dim shapes of 3 or 4 people could be seen. In a corner of the veranda, there was a fitful, muffled sob. The little boy was trying to cry for his mother, but was stopped each time by Chidam. "Dukhi," said Ramlochan nervously, "are you there?" Dukhi had been sitting like a statue for a long time. Now, on hearing his name, he burst into tears like a helpless child. Chidam quickly came down from the veranda into the yard to meet Ramlochan. "Have the women been quarrelling again?" Ramlochan asked. "I heard them yelling all day." Chidam, all this time, had been unable to think what to do. Various impossible stories occurred to him. All he had decided was that later that night he would move the body somewhere. He had never expected Ramlochan to come. He could think of no swift reply. "Yes," he stumbled. "Today they were quarrelling terribly." "But why is Dukhi crying so?" asked Ramlochan, stepping towards the veranda. Seeing no way out now, Chidam blurted. In their quarrel, Chotabo struck at Borobo's head with a farm knife. When immediate danger threatens, it is hard to think of other dangers. Chidam's only thought was of how to escape from the terrible truth. He forgot that a life can be even more terrible. A reply to Ramlochan's question had come instantly to mind. He had blurted it out. "Good grief," said Ramlochan in horror. "What are you saying? Is she dead?" "She's dead," said Chidam, clasping Ramlochan's feet. Ramlochan was trapped. Ram, he thought, what a mess I've got into this evening. What if I have to be a witness in court? Chidam was still clinging to his feet, saying, "Thakur, how can I save my wife?" Ramlochan was the village's chief source of advice on legal matters. Reflecting further, he said, "I think I know a way. Run to the police station, say that your brother Dukhi returned in the evening wanting for food, and because it wasn't ready, he struck his wife on the head with his knife. I'm sure that if you say that, she'll get off." Chidam felt a sickening dryness in his throat. He stood up and said, "Thakur, if I lose my wife, I can get another. But if my brother is hanged, how can I replace him?" In laying the blame on his wife, he had not seen it that way. He had spoken without thought. Now, imperceptibly, arguments that would serve his own needs were forming in his mind. Ramlochan took the point. "Then say what actually happened," he said. "You cannot protect yourself on all sides." In no time after he had hurried away, the news spread round the village like that Chandara Rui had, in a quarrel with her sister-in-law, split her head open with a farm knife. Police charged into the village like a river in flood. Both the guilty and the innocent were equally afraid. Chidam decided he would have to stick to the path he had chalked out for himself. The story he had given to Ramlochan Chakraborty had gone all round the village. Who knew what would happen if another story was circulated? But he realized that if he kept to the story, he would have to wrap it in 5 more stories if his wife was to be saved. Chidam asked Chandara to take the blame onto herself. She was dumbfounded. He assured her, "Don't worry, If you do what I tell you, if you'll be safe." But whatever his words, his throat was dry and his face was pale. Chandara was not more than 17 or 18. She was buxom, well-rounded, compact and sturdy, so trim in her movements that in walking, turning, bending or squatting there was no awkwardness at all. She was like a brand new boat, neat and shapely, gliding with ease, not a loose joint anywhere. Everything amused and intrigued her. She loved to gossip. Her bright, restless, deep black eyes missed nothing as she walked to the ghat, pitcher on her hip, parting her veil slightly with her finger. The elder wife had been her exact opposite, unkempt, sloppy, and slovenly. She was utterly disorganized in her dress, housework, and the care of her child. She never had any proper work in hand, yet never seemed to have time for anything. The younger wife usually refrained from comment, but at the mildest bar, Radha would rage and stamp and let fly at her, disturbing everyone around. Each wife was matched by her husband to an extraordinary degree. Dukhi Ram was a huge man. His bones were immense, his nose was squat. In his eyes and expression, he seemed not to understand the world very well, yet he never questioned it either. He was innocent yet fearsome, a rare combination of power and helplessness. Chidam, however, seemed to have been carefully carved from shiny black rock. There was not an inch of excess fat on him, not a wrinkle or pockmark anywhere. Each limb was a perfect blend of strength and finesse. Whether jumping from a river bank or punting a boat or climbing up bamboo shoots for sticks, he showed complete dexterity, effortless grace. His long black hair was combed with oil back from his brow and down to his shoulders. He took great care over his dress and appearance. Although he was not unresponsive to the beauty of other women in the village and was keen to make himself charming in their eyes, his real love was for his young wife. They quarreled sometimes, but always made peace again, for neither could defeat the other. There was a further reason why the bond between them was firm. Chidam felt that a wife as nimble and sharp as Chandra could not be wholly trusted, and Chandra felt that her husband had roving eyes, that if she didn't keep him on a tight rein, he might go astray. A little before the events in this story, however, they had a major row. Chandra found that her husband used work as an excuse for travelling far and for staying extra days away, yet brought no earnings home. Finding this ominous, she too began to overstep the mark. She kept going to the ghat and returning from wandering round the village with rather too much to say about Kashi Mojumdar's middle son. Something now seemed to poison Chidam's life. He could not settle his attention at the work. One day he bitterly rebuked his sister-in-law, laying the blame on her. She threw up her hands and said in the name of her dead father, "That girl runs before the storm. How can I restrain her? Who knows what ruin she will bring?" Chandra came out of the next room and said sweetly, "What's the matter, Didi?" And a fierce quarrel broke out between them. Chidam glared at his wife and said, "If I ever hear that you have been to the ghat on your own, I'll break every bone in your body." "That would be a blessed release," said Chandra, starting to leave. Chidam sprang at her, grabbed her by the hair, dragged her back to the room and locked her in. When he returned from work that evening, he found the doors open, the house empty. Chandra had fled 3 villages away to her maternal uncle's house. With great difficulty, Chidam persuaded her to return, but now he had to give in. It was as hard to restrain his wife as to hold a handful of mercury. She always slipped through his fingers. He did not use force anymore, but there was no peace in the house. Ever fearful love for his elusive young wife racked him with intense pain. He even once or twice wondered if it would be better if she were dead. At least he would get some peace then. Human beings can hate each other more than death. It was at this time that the crisis hit the house. When her husband asked her to admit to the murder, Chandra stared at him, stunned. Her black eyes burnt him like fire. Then she slowly shrank away from him, as if to escape his devilish clutches. She turned her heart and soul quite away. "You have nothing to fear," said Chidam. He taught her repeatedly what she should say to the police and the magistrate. Chandra paid no attention, sat like a wooden idol whenever he spoke. Dukhi relied on Chidam for everything. When he told him to lay the blame on Chandra, Dukhiram asked, "But what will happen to her?" "I'll save her," said Chidam. His burly brother was content with that. This was what Chidam instructed his wife to say. "The elder wife is about to attack me with a vegetable slicer. I picked up a farm knife to stop her, but it somehow cut into her head." This was all Ramlochan's invention. He had generously supplied Chidam with the proofs and embroidery that the story would require. The police came to investigate. The villagers were sure now that Chandra had murdered her sister-in-law, and all the witnesses confirmed this. When the police questioned Chandra, she said, "Yes, I killed her." "Why did you kill her?" "I couldn't stand her anymore." "Was there a brawl between you?" "No." "Did she attack you first?" "No." "Did she ill-treat you?" "No." Everyone was amazed at these replies, and Chidam was completely thrown off balance. "She is not telling the truth," he said. "The elder wife first." The inspector silenced him sharply. Subjecting Chandra to a thorough cross-examination, he repeatedly received the same reply. Chandra would not accept that she had been attacked in any way by her sister-in-law. Such an obstinate girl was never seen. She seemed absolutely bent on going to the gallows. Nothing would stop her. Such fierce, disastrous pride. In her thoughts, Chandra was saying to her husband, "I shall give my youth to the gallows instead of to you. My final ties in this life will be with them." Chandra was arrested and left her home forever by the paths she knew so well, past the festival carriage, the marketplace, the ghat, the Mujumdar's house, the post office, the school, an ordinary, harmless, flirtatious, fun-loving village wife, carrying a stigma that could never be obliterated. A bevy of boys followed her, and the women of the village, her friends and companions, some of them peering through their veils, some from their doorsteps, some from behind trees, watched the police leading her away and shuddered with embarrassment, fear, and contempt. To the deputy magistrate, Chandra again confessed her guilt, claiming no ill treatment from her sister-in-law at the time of the murder. But when Chidam was called to the witness box, he broke down completely, weeping, clasping his hands and saying, "I swear to you, sir, my wife is innocent." The magistrate sternly told him to control himself and began to question him. Bit by bit, the true story came out. The magistrate did not believe him because the chief, most respectable, most educated witness, Ramlochan Chakravarti, said, "I appeared on the scene a little after the murder. Chidam confessed everything to me and clung to my feet saying, 'Tell me how I can save my wife.' I did not say anything one way or the other. Then Chidam said, 'If I say that my elder brother killed his wife in a fit of fury because his food wasn't ready, will she get off?' I said, 'Be careful, you rogue. Don't say a single false word in court. There's no worse offense than that.' Ramlochan had previously prepared lots of stories that would save Chandra, but when he found that she herself was bending her neck to receive the news, he decided, 'Why the hell should I run the risk of giving false evidence now? I'd better say what little I know.' So Ramlochan said what he knew, or rather, said a little more than he knew. The deputy magistrate committed the case to a sessions trial. Meanwhile, in the fields, houses, markets, and bazaars, the mirth and grief of the world carried on. And just as in previous years, torrential monsoon rains fell on to the new rice crop. Police, defendant, and witnesses were all in court. In the civil court opposite, hordes of people were waiting for their cases. A Calcutta lawyer had come on a suit about the sharing of a pond behind a kitchen. The plaintiff had 39 witnesses. Hundreds of people were anxiously waiting for hair-splitting judgments, certain that nothing at present was more important. Chidam stared out of the window at the constant throng, and it seemed like a dream. A koel bird was hooting from a huge banyan tree in the compound. No courts or cases in his world. Chandara said to the judge, "Sir, how many times must I go on saying the same thing?" The judge explained, "Do you know the penalty for the crime you have confessed?" "No," said Chandara. "It is death by the hanging." "Then please give it to me, sir," said Chandara. "Do what you like. I can't take this anymore." When her husband was called to the court, she turned away. "Look at the witness," said the judge, "and say who he is." "He is my husband," said Chandara, covering her face with her hands. "Does he not love you?" "Like crazy." "Do you not love him?" "Madly." When Chidam was questioned, he said, "I killed her." "Why?" "I wanted my food and my sister-in-law didn't give it to me." When Dukhiram came to give evidence, he fainted. When he came round again, he answered, "Sir, I killed her." "Why?" "I wanted a meal and she didn't give it to me." After extensive cross-examination of various other witnesses, the judge concluded that the brothers had confessed to the crime in order to save the younger wife from the shame of the news. But Chandara had, from the police investigation right through to the trials, said the same story repeatedly. She had not budged an inch from her story. Two barristers, of their own volition, did their utmost to save her from the death sentence, but in the end were defeated by her. Who, on that auspicious night when, at a very young age, a dusky, diminutive, round-faced girl had left her childhood dolls in her father's house and come to her in-laws' house, could have imagined these events? Her father, on his deathbed, had happily reflected that at least he had made proper arrangements for his daughter's future. In Gaon, just before the hanging, a kindly civil surgeon asked Chandara, "Do you want to see anyone?" "I'd like to see my mother," she replied. "Shall I call your husband?" asked the doctor. "He wants to see you." "Not him," said Chandara. Thank you for listening. If you have any suggestions for other books, or if you want to listen to something other than stories, do let me know in the comments section below. Till then, stay tuned to my channel every Wednesday and Saturday for more food for imagination. If you like my stories, please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to show your support. Goodbye.